Good evening, folks. What? I know, didn't I tell you about that? My name's Jim Hayden. I know, there's a whole process when you start talking. Jeff's got to turn them on. And I didn't mean to say it like that, but we're gonna be doing a lot of this tonight where you basically, when people talk, but you gotta wait. Jeff, how you doing up there? You want me to turn it on?
I think it just might be turned down.
They couldn't hear me in the course room because I'm required to hit the space bar when I talk. So this is going to take a little bit of work, as I say. So can you hear me in the course room? Mission accomplished. So this is my connection to the internet. This is my connection to the auditorium. And away we go. Once again, Jim Hayden here as your moderator. Welcome to the 2021 annual school district meeting for the town of Bow. Please join me for a pledge of allegiance.
Color guard attention. Scout salute. Raise the colors. Will you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Scouts at ease.
You may be seated. So thank you again, folks. Welcome to the meeting. This is Jim Hayden. We've done our best to try to make this as familiar as possible to everybody, as socially distanced as we all need to be. So in front, we have for presentation our school board as Bryce Larrabee, Jennifer Strongreen, Martin Osterloh, Eric Schulman, Jenna Reardon, and of course, Dr. Dean Cascadden, our superintendent, and Dwayne Ford, our assistant superintendent. Matt Upton, our attorney, is somewhere around here. And I have John Rich, our school district clerk, and helping us with all this technology and doing a great job is Roy Bailey and Jeff Somerville. This is the point in my notes where I tell you there's no smoking. So anyone who tries to smoke with your mask on, good luck to you. It's not going to work. So we're going to try to have the same format that we usually have with all of our meetings, and that is we're going to present each article one by one. We'll put them up on the board, and because we have the internet watching us tonight and the people in the out rooms, we're going to have the presentations made over in that station with a microphone and a camera. And then we will have a presentation on each article as we always do. When folks want to have questions, we have a microphone and a camera in the usual position in the back of the auditorium. And then once we deal with questions in here, we'll see if there's any folks joining us in the overflow rooms and ask for their comments and questions. That'll be the trickiest part, because every time we open the connection between this room and the overflow rooms, that's when the real trickiness gets with the technology. So, well, at some point, we'll have to deal with that. And I might even try to do it right now. So I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the band room who wants to say hello. Okay, please step up to the microphone and make a comment or sing a song or do a dance.
No jokes, no nothing. Just we can hear you, Jim. You're doing a good job so far. Band room checking out.
Chorus room checking in.
Band room, can you hear me now? Thank you. And there's a delay between the time I push this button down and when I can talk. So I'll quit complaining about the technology and we'll get on with the meeting. This is where I read the beginning of our warrant, but I'm going to skip that tonight because we all know that the first part of all of our meetings is a presentation, a report of Dr. Dean Cascadden on the state of the school district. So at this point, I will recognize Dr. Cascadden.
How are we doing now? Am I non-muted? Much better, thank you. No, you're muted. And of course, with the pandemic, I've had a lot of time to think about things. I mean, what else are you going to do? I went into my closet and somehow my suit coat shrunk during the pandemic, and I had to get around, so I got to stop eating and stuff. But you know, I'm a lifelong New Hampshire resident. I grew up in Littleton, New Hampshire. The mountains are a big part of my life. I now live in Meredith. I spent 4 years in Virginia learning about diversity, and that was a very important part of my life, getting a doctorate. But I've always loved March. My birthday is March 30th, and I have memories of my birthday being in full snow, memories of my birthday being in full sun, and of course, there's always mud season. There's tapping maples. There's getting out of the house after a long winter. And a big part of my love of New Hampshire is the annual meeting. And I've been participating in them since I turned 18 years old in Littleton and could go and sit in an auditorium like this and talk about what's going on. And I have that North Country kind of vein in me that, you know, we're going to gather together in a room. We're going to look each other in the eye. We're going to say our piece. And then we're going to vote. And when it's all done, we're going to shake hands. And we're going to go on with our life, and we're going to accept what's going on. meeting face to face, meeting in a room together keeps me accountable as your superintendent. It's easy for me to write things behind a keyboard. I think it's easier for all of us to write things behind a keyboard and maybe not be as kind with our neighbors as we should be as we discuss the issues. But somehow when we have to get in a room together, we have to look each other in the face and talk about things. I just think it's a better way of governing. And so I come to you today, and in the North Country, I'm going to give you the true terms of talking. I'm going to talk to you about what I really feel is going on in your schools. And your schools are good. Your schools are really good. Despite the pandemic, they are really good. And they're really prepared to get better going forward. Your kids are all right. Been a tough year. Some of them, we need to get in on Monday and we need to start talking to them, getting some services and so forth. But they've been amazingly good with this through this pandemic. They've missed a lot of stuff that they should have been able to do if they haven't been, but they've been pretty good. They've adapted very well. In New Hampshire right now, if you look at the legislative agenda that's going forward, there's a heavy pressure on public schools, and it saddens me. It saddens me because public schools are where we come together and we accept everyone into the tent. And you can come no matter who you are, how much money your dad makes, and who you are as a person, race, gender, and so forth. And we come together and we try to work together to create the society that's going to move forward. And there's pressures to dismantle that in the legislative agenda. There's choice, there's charters, there's money following children. There's also been a lot of downshifting of costs that were at one time borne by the state and are now down to the local taxpayer. And especially in Bow, you got a lot of pressure on your taxes. You have downshifts from the state. We have the things that has happened with the power plant. And it's very hard to come in front of you and ask you to pay more in taxes, especially when we've been in the pandemic and the economy is the way it is. But I'm going to ask you to do that tonight because it's worth it. And I think you pay for quality, but we're very frugal. You know, that's one thing my mom taught me. Don't waste your money. Buy quality. If you're going to buy something, buy good quality, make it last, keep it for a while, and enjoy it. Don't buy something cheap. Well, you got quality in both. And you have to pay for it because it is quality. And when you built it, you had the power plant helping you build it. And we don't have that anymore. And the selectmen have done an incredible job of absorbing the tax hit from not only the less valuation, but also the payback on the overvaluation. They've done an incredible job for your town. Later slides, we'll look at cost per pupil in the district, and you'll see that we're in a good place there. And I'm also going to talk about the BES projects a little bit. But like I said in the introduction, I got about 2 years away from retirement, so I'm able to say things maybe I really feel. Could you go to the next slide, please? This has been our mission statement for a while. The first one is the absolute most important one. You'll see we have a teacher around here who's head of our student senate, Brenda Barth. She has a t-shirt on, says, create good humans. And that's the first thing we do. This is the first thing we look at. We care for each person every day. We want to teach your children to value other people. We want to teach them to be good human beings, to accept other people for who they are, to listen to them, to support them, and to build a community with them. So that's number one, care for each person every day. Number two, we want to focus on learning. And especially this year in the pandemic, it really forced us to focus on that because everything else got kind of stripped away when we were going forward. And finally, we teach to touch the future. And that means that we always have to look ahead because what worked for us, what worked for me growing up, what worked for us right now is not going to cut it for kids who are facing a world that's changing and evolving as rapidly as it is. All right, next slide, please. All right, there's our enrollment. You'll notice there's a bottoming out between the years 13 and 14. On July 1st, 2014, the Dunbarton District joined the BES District and we became a multi-district SAU. That is a seminal event in the history of our schools. We were headed to a bad place. We were headed to a high school that was going to be Division III, Division IV. We're headed to a place where we were going to have excess capacity in our building. And we sat in here and we talked about it. And Dunbarton came on and joined us, and it really stabilized our enrollment. It brought us up to a good place where we filled our buildings to pretty much capacity. And it's really been, I think, a very good partnership. We begin next year. After this year, we'll begin next year renegotiating that agreement. And I'm very hopeful that those negotiations go well and they stay a part of our district. But it's a seminal event, and they've made us, or they're with us and made us where we are. Next slide, please. This looks at the school enrollment, and the top one is Bow High School. And you see that rapid rise from about 2014, which we would expect because we're bringing in the Dunbarton students. The red line is the middle school. They've been relatively stable. The one that has surprised us is the green line, and that's Bow Elementary School. It surprised us because that's not due to Dunbarton. We have had increased enrollment in Bow Elementary School, and we're not really sure if it's going to continue. I mean, it's down a little bit this year. That could be pandemic related. But tonight on your warrant, you're going to have two things about the elementary school: the HVAC and the roof. That's just the start. We had a full renovation on the docket last year when we canceled the meeting due to COVID. Those needs have not gone away. And Bow Youth Center is not going to work. It wasn't built as a school. The amount of money you're going to have to put in there to make it available to be used as a school will not be worthwhile. So I may not be around, and that enrollment may level off, although Dwayne showed me a graph the other day of the highest birth rate we've had in many years was last year. So you got an elementary school that needs some work. You're going to ask you to fix the roof and the HVAC. That's the minimum we need to do. But eventually you're going to have to fix things inside the building. And eventually you're going to have to look at capacity. And we would have looked at it last year, except for the pandemic kind of cut it short. And this year we said, well, we got to do what we really need to do. Next slide, please. This is your enrollment that goes for every grade. And we look SAU wide. At the high school, we fold in students from Hooksett because we fold in a few of them. And this year, the maroon on top is new homeschoolers this year. One of the things when we built the budget during the pandemic, a number of people went to homeschooling, especially in the lower grades, and we tried to fold those in. Our sweet spot is right about 160 students a grade. That's our sweet spot. That's where we want to be. That's where capacity for our buildings kind of is kind of optimal. And you know, we're below. It doesn't show well on the slide up there, but pretty much the 10th and 11th grade classes are right at that sweet spot. You can see we've got some room to absorb some students, and we're not going to be like, oh, we need to build classrooms tomorrow. But eventually, that's something that the community is going to have to wrestle with. If we can keep it right at the 160, that'd be good. But Dunbarton's building out a little bit. They have some subdivisions that's been approved, and you know, we'll have to see what happens with the Bow enrollment. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened this year with the pandemic response. Your schools were closed by executive order on March 15th of last year, and we were full remote to the end of the year. Over the summer, we developed this opening plan. There were two key elements of our opening plan. One was a flexible response, that we were going to respond to conditions in the environment to either keep schools open or close them. And the second thing was what we call the integrated learning model, that we wanted to design an instructional model that no matter whether you were at home or whether you were in school, you got the same education, you could switch rapidly between those two. So we did some work over that, and it's been more or less successful. And it gives you some statistics up there. We started in green, which means all kids could come in with 33 days. When we went to substantial community spread, we went to what's called default yellow, where kids were in school mostly about 2/5 of the time. You had A through K cohort and L through Z. And we did that from middle of November until today. And Monday, we're coming back into full green. And we want all the kids in there, everyone who wants to come in here. And we want them in all 5 days as much as possible. There's still a little bit of people who are out for various reasons, and we may have to quarantine or cohort. But we've been in, I think, as much as we really could be in safely. Your administrators especially worked very hard on safety protocols. Our union has worked with us. We have negotiations coming up next year, and I'll tell you, a union for the most part really worked with us to keep schools open. They were concerned about their safety as workers, but I really think they worked with us, and we have to give them thanks for that, and especially as we work with them. We had 4 remote snow days, which I think I got roasted on the Bow community page a little bit on about give the kids a real snow day and so forth. And I don't know what we're going to do going forward, but we may never have another snow day again because of the way that we've changed, and we'll have to look at that. So it's been a tough year. It's been a hard year. It's been a very, very hard year. It's been hard on staff. I haven't slept a whole lot. Sometimes I struggle. It's been a hard year mental health wise when you talk to people. It's been a hard year on kids. They didn't get sports seasons that they waited for. They didn't get events that they waited for. They didn't get a lot of things. They didn't get to see their families and friends. Not their friends. It's been a very hard year on families. Very, very hard year on families not to have your kids go to school and have to rearrange your work cycle and have to work with remote kids, and especially in grades K through 4, where you've had to be home being a teacher or a helper while we broadcast that into your room. But it's changed us, and not necessarily in a bad way. There's no going back. The journey has changed us. The only way out of this is through, and the obstacle will become the path. And there are things that we are going to do going forward that we've learned from this. I mean, even this concept of how we have a meeting like this, we'll adapt some of the technology we have, we'll use it, and not all of it, and we're going to go forward. So let me talk a little bit about how we're going forward. Next slide, please. Dr. Bartlett is hired as our Director of Curriculum Instruction. She is incredibly smart. She is talented. She is fun. And she has a vision, or actually the vision was here, but she's really started to help us implement this vision, working with Roy Bailey, our tech director who's been here. And we're looking at something called Future Ready Schools. Now, we looked at this before. We signed on to it quite a few years ago, so it's not new. But the pandemic response has accelerated this change. And to summarize it as briefly as I can, it's about mass personalization. It's using technology to try to meet each individual student where they are and give them an education that fits them. Engage the child in their own education, give them voice and choice, and use technology to leverage mass personalization. And it's a natural evolution. I mean, in colonial days, when you wanted something built, you went to a craftsman, And they built that personally to your liking, and they built it to fit you. And education was similar. You went to one-room schoolhouses, and the teacher sat down and designed pretty much an individual education program for you and the other 10 or 12 students who were in that one-room schoolhouse. Then came the assembly line and the factory model of education, designed by the Prussians or the Germans. I can't remember whether Prussia or Germany, where you put students all in the same at the same age in grades, and you put them in what's called the egg carton building with classrooms off a central hallway, and you gave everyone the same thing, and you expected everyone to move through school at the exact same pace and the exact same level. And that worked. At the time that education was useful, there was a large immigrant population in the United States. They had to be Americanized, and they had to be trained to work in factories. And that model worked for the times. Well, we have a different context now. We have a diverse worldwide population who work in teams and then break apart and work in different teams. And they use technology to leverage change. And we need an education that's going to change to reflect that. And we are implementing future-ready schools. We're getting our staff ready to move forward on that. And we're excited about it. We just had a PD day. The other thing we've emphasized this year is a real focus on equity and diversity. Again, I grew up in northern New Hampshire. We had one Black person in my town. The first time I really ran into a significant population of Black people was college. And my dad, who was in the segregated service, he's dead now, rest his soul, walked onto my freshman year dorm and said, "Boy, you certainly have a lot of darkies on your floor." And I was like, "Dad, you can't say that." But we're in northern New Hampshire, and we just aren't exposed to a whole lot of diversity. And he wasn't a mean man. He was a loving man, but he just wasn't exposed to different people. And you need that exposure. And especially in northern New Hampshire, we need to understand that everyone is not like us. And we live in a society where we really have to talk to kids about this equity and diversity. That people have different experiences. They have different cultures. They have different upbringings. And that doesn't invalidate our own. We just have to understand where they're coming from. So when we work with them, when we live with them, and when we try to move forward with them, we understand that we're different. And it's okay. And that we don't offend them unknowingly, or we don't offend them by treating them through stereotypic lenses. And Matt Fisk, who's the assistant principal, is working really hard on that. He talks about windows and mirrors. And in our curriculum, in our schools, we have to give kids mirrors so that they can see themselves in the curriculum and get validated. And we have to give them windows so that they can see others in the curriculum and understand that not everyone is like them. And finally, the implementation of MTSSB, which is multi-tiered system of support. We're focusing on behavior, and we're focusing on social and emotional. So I'm probably going to end there. I'm going to talk about, we do have Gail Theos, who's been the administrative assistant to the superintendent for 20 years, is retiring at the end of this month. And I'm going to miss her. She's been a rock solid person in the office for us. She's been a sunny disposition, jokingly called the director of first impressions. And I'm going to miss her terribly. But we're also moving the SAU in a new direction. We're going to digitize, we're going to update. If we're a future-ready school, then all our employment practices, all our hiring practices, all of our internal processes should be digitized. And we're moving in that direction. And we're going to move our team all down together. And to do that, we're going to focus on training and professional development. So to end, thank you for listening. A lot of times I come to this meeting and I feel I have to not be political to, let's get this over, just cover the facts and talk about where we are. But I really felt this year I wanted to share with you my heart I wanted to share with you the things that I see in this district, things I see in this town. Bow is a great town. It really is. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise your family. It's a great place to commune with other people. And I want to tell you, your schools are all right. They're good. You should continue to fight for them. Hopefully tonight you will continue to pay for them. I want to thank you for giving me the privilege of being your superintendent for as long as I have. And I just wanted to share my heart with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cascadden. So we're now on to Article 2, which is, of course, the budget. Article 2 is to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the budget committee's recommended amount of $31,313,422 for the support of our schools, as presented in front of you and up on your screens in the overflow rooms. This article does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles. This article does include the cost of the Bow School District food service program, and it was recommended by the Budget Committee 7-0 and recommended by the School Board 5-0. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move Article 2, please.
I second that.
Okay, Article 2 has been moved and seconded, and I recognize Jen Strongrain for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Before I start, I just want to kind of reemphasize what our students who have been beyond flexible for us and have taught us lessons each and every day about how to overcome all the boundaries that have been placed on us. It's just been amazing to watch as a community to come together. It's been a difficult year, but it's been a great year for us in Bow. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone involved to get us to where we are today. So thank you all. As we just looked at Article number 2, as it just read, from when the school board first looked over the budget from now, the board has first cut over a little, about 350,000 from the budget. We looked at such things as staffing requests, changes, computers, and stipends. And then we also looked at using some of the CARES Act funds, which is from our COVID relief funds, to pay for some of our technology, rather than to put that into the budget before you. Additionally, under the watchful eye of the Budget Committee, another 295,000 was cut. And that is how we brought about the budget that's being brought to you today. Next slide, please. As you can see by this slide, this year's budget is up 3.17%. Oops, sorry, next slide, please. Sorry. Most of this increase is driven by salaries, benefits, and contracted services. And these are areas that are difficult, if not impossible, for us to reduce. We worked very hard to bring forth a budget that was neutral or a reduction, as we have in the past. But this year, the increase of the benefits was really hard for us to overcome, while still providing the school and students with what they so need right now. Next slide, please. While it's great that we have an increase of revenue this year of about $460,000. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that there is a decrease of aid in the amount of $470,000. So in this area, it's almost a wash for us. Next slide, please. So what does all this mean, and how will it impact our taxes? If you look at the current local taxes raised, along with the increased operating budget, our increased local revenues, our decrease in our adequacy grant, our decrease in SWEP, the estimated local property taxes, the increase in our local taxes raised, and you then get the estimated change in our local rate of 0.77, which is a tax rate change of 4.84%. Next slide, please. Now let's take a minute and see how that compares to other towns in New Hampshire. If you look at our cost per pupil, which is calculated by the New Hampshire Department of Education, you can see that district-wide, Bow is ranked 27th out of 162 districts. The rank of 1 is the lowest, and then it goes up from there. The elementary school is 23rd out of 155 districts. The middle is 20th out of 60 districts, and the high school is 15th out of 73 districts. So while we commonly hear that Bow is one of the higher tax rates in and schools in the state, this shows that we are not quite as high as I think the perception is out there. Next slide, please. Here's a graph that compares Bow to the state of New Hampshire. And you can see there was a time that Bow's cost per pupil was way higher than the state average. But after much work done by administrators and staff, our board and the budget committee, we are now happy to say that we are currently below the state average. Next slide, please. You can now look also at our tax rate, and you can see that Bow has a local education tax rate of about $14. When you compare that to different towns around the state of New Hampshire that we're commonly compared to, such as Hopkinton, Amherst, and Henniker, you can see that we are actually below that average, or excuse me, not that average, of their rate. And then if you compare it to Bedford or Concord, you can see that we are higher, but both those towns have many more businesses to support their taxes. The state minimum is 45 cents, which is unheard of. It's great for them. And the state maximum is $20, and the medium is about $11. So you can see that while we are a little above the medium, we're still quite a bit lower than some of the other towns in the state. Next slide, please. If you look at the next slide, you can see that again, Bow is below 25% below the state average. So overall, we are doing pretty well for the state of New Hampshire. Next slide, please. And before we move on, I just want to say, as the budget committee rep for the school board, this year's process with the budget committee was absolutely a wonderful experience. We really worked hand in hand to come together with the budget before you. It really was a great process, and I just want to thank the budget committee for making it such a great year for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Does anyone like to speak to Article 2? Okay, hang on. everybody should have received a green card on the way in, and that's how we'll be voting. So I'm going to call a vote on Article 2, and all those in favor, please raise your green card. Okay, thank you. Great, Laura. All those opposed, please raise your card. Okay, thank you. I'm going to say the votes in this room would overrule the other two in the other room, and I'm going to say that Article 2 has been adopted and is passed. Thank you. So the motion is to restrict reconsideration on Article 2. Okay, so we have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 2. All those in favor, please raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed? There's no opposition. The motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 2 has passed. We are now on to Article 3. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $941,820 for the replacement of the HVAC rooftop units and additional associated mechanical equipment and replacements at Bow Elementary School as presented on the overhead. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move Article 3, please.
Article 3 has been moved and seconded, and I will again recognize Jen for discussion on this article.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. While we are discussing Article 3, I will also this pertains to Article 4 because it's both the HVAC and the roof, but they're just written in two different articles. I also want to note that this will have no tax impact as we'll be using funds from different capital reserve funds. Next slide, please. So Article 3, as we just read, pertains to the HVAC replacement at the Bow Elementary School. This is important because of it really, as Dean spoke to earlier, we've been looking at the elementary school as a whole as it needs some major work done to it. But knowing that the COVID impact and the financial impacts that we could have on our community, we pushed that out for a couple of years at least. But with airflow being of utmost importance right now because of COVID, we are looking at replacing the HVAC system, and it would make sense at that point to also do our roof because they kind of go hand in hand. So if this were to be approved, it would be the removal of all existing HVAC rooftop equipment and the installation of new equipment that would be up to standards for the new COVID standards, and would be the balancing and testing of all new equipment. And the scheduled completion date would be by August 16th, so that we're hoping that it would not impact the start of the 21-22 school year, because we want to get those kids in the building. Next slide, please. This warrant does not include such work as any of the HVAC ductwork below the roof deck, replacing the boilers, replacing the controllers inside the building below the roof deck, or any other components of the larger project, except for the roof replacement, which is Article 4. Next slide, please. So how did we get to needing to replace the HVAC and the roof? And that kind of goes along with the project. I think about 2 years ago, a committee was formed, of which I am the chair. And we discovered that we needed quite a bit of work done in that building. And as I stated before, we were looking at a major renovation and possibly an addition, but due to COVID, we did push that project out. But there are still major needs in that building that needs to be addressed. As part of that committee work, we reviewed previous reports and enrollment data. We conducted tours, we consulted fire, police, facility director, and safety, administration and staff were all asked about what was wrong with the building and what the needs were. We developed a want versus need list. We consulted construction professionals for estimates of different costs. We had the HL Turner Group come in and do a space analysis study for us. And then we also worked with the board to finalize a proposal that unfortunately never got to come to you guys. Next slide, please. So members of the committee were myself, administration, community members, and we consulted different professionals throughout our community. And as I stated, we did have that space needs survey done, or excuse me, not survey, but project done. So that, next slide, please, brings us to replacing the HVAC system at the elementary school.
Thank you, Jen. Would anyone like to speak to Article 3? Okay.
I have a question. Is there a contingency plan in place if they do not complete the HVAC by end of August? We may have that discussion because I have 2 kids in elementary now and we have a third going in the fall. I'm wondering if the elementary school, or they have discussion about what will happen or if that's going to happen, both learning for them.
So I'm going to ask if you could repeat the question into the microphone.
I'm
So,
sorry.
yeah, and frankly, I can't even see who's talking because of the mask. So yeah, so I think Dwayne can repeat it into the
Do you
microphone.
want me- I can repeat the question. 'Cause
Yes, please.
I heard it. So, I think the question, if I can synopsis is there a contingency plan if the construction for whatever reason wasn't completed in time for, and we used August 16th as substantial completion day. That's not our first day of school. Our first day of school is about 2 weeks after that. It's August 30th is, I think, the first day with kids for next year. So there's 2 parts to that. There's a damages part of the contract that we have in that contract that anything beyond the 16th, the school district has the opportunity to request money back from the project. However, that doesn't change the fact that there could be a chance that project wouldn't be done today. And the reason why there was, when there was initial discussions about moving this meeting back, the reason that we advocated administratively to have this meeting take place now is so that we can get those equipment ordered. The lead time on those can be significant. We've got in the bid specs and with the CM that we've already picked, we know what components those are going to be. We have a pretty good idea what that lead time is going to be. We've basically told them they can start the project almost immediately. The contract's already been approved by our attorney, their attorney. We're going to sign it on Monday pending approval. We're very confident in the timeline that we have, that this is going to get taken place. The second part of the project is the roof. So the HVAC is going to be done first because that's essential. The roof is something that, we also think that's no problem. That's going to get done. But if we had to punt on the roof and move that later, we did that actually in the Memorial School renovation back in 2005. That roof actually didn't take place until the following year. And that was fine. That was just an extra year of the warranty, but we're confident in the timeline. We've got contingencies in place, to hold the CM accountable for the project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sir, could you state your name and your street address for the clerk?
Yes, my name is Peter Poulos. I live at Whittier Drive. Me and my brother, Whittier. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
Over
well,
there.
Go ahead, let's,
What is the life expectancy of this HVAC system? Like, modern enough that you have to replace another 5 years? You don't have to be-
Yeah, great. Good question. So there are components up on that roof that are original to the building. So 1970. Oh, repeat the question. Sorry. How life expectancy of the HVAC equipment that we're putting into the that were designed to put into the project. Is that good?
Yeah, and then is it modern enough that you're not looking at another?
Yeah.
5 or 10 years?
Yeah, for sure. So the HVAC equipment that we have right now, some of those components are 1979. So one of the issues that we're having right now is parts and maintaining that equipment. Plus, it doesn't do some of the things that we want it to do. We fully expect this equipment to serve us for 30 years. I mean, that's what, when we talked about, and Dee mentioned it, and I'm thinking of the same thought. When I do a project, I don't want to come back to you while I'm still here and ask for us to do it again. So when we did the renovation project at the Memorial School in 2005, I don't know when my career is going to end, but I don't want to stand up here again and ask for the things that we renovated in 05. And we haven't had to do that. It's been great stuff. So we're going to try to do that same thing. So I think, you're going to see in the roof in a second, it's got a 25-year warranty. We think it's going to last well beyond that because we try very hard to maintain our things and make them last as long as possible, which we've been able to do at the elementary school. So I think 30 years is what we're banking on, and you'll have somebody else who will answer that question, because I'm not as young as I used to be.
I'm going to ask you to go to the microphone, please.
Did we get the name of the last one?
Oh, Lisa Franklin, 3 Pine Crest.
My name's Michelle York, Stony Brook Road. I was curious if there's been any discussion around, particularly around the HVAC. I know this doesn't have a tax impact per se, and it's coming out of capital reserve funds, but my understanding is that the town of Bow did receive some, I think they're called ESSER funds from the CARES Act. Is there any plan to use that money towards something like this? It seems like a ideal use for such funds. I was just curious if that had been evaluated.
Definitely. I like this. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So right now we have, and I don't want to get into the minute details, but we had an original allocation of about $60,000 that came in the original COVID Relief Act that the federal government passed back in December. So about 60,000, we allocated that towards technology. That actually helped lower some of the proposed budget that we had. Then the governor stepped in when FEMA kind of pulled back from doing direct reimbursement for things like PPE and cleaning and additional staffing time. The governor stepped in $200 per student. That came from the state's allocation in that CARES money. We received that. That had to be spent by December 31st. We've been able to do that. That was super helpful and beneficial in terms of this year's budget because we had additional costs in order to be open. The third round of funding, which was passed, is about $270,000. And what we've talked about with the board is that money is perfect for this project. So as we get into the project, if we get to the conclusion of it, we haven't allocated that money for any other project, we could lessen the amount that we would withdraw from capital reserve funds. So that would be really beneficial down the road when we come back with a potential elementary school project. We would have more capital reserve fund money to lower the cost. Now, we just passed another round of funding that has school money in it. I don't know what that's going to look like, but our estimate is that we're going to receive money as part of that 1.9 trillion that just got passed. So we could very much reduce what we have to withdraw, and that would help us down the road.
Chris Ulrich, 21 Ridgewood Drive. So first, thank you all for the hard work you put in and continue to put in for our schools. Assuming for a moment that all the money for warrant articles 3 and 4 came out of capital reserves, what would the fund balance be for our capital reserve fund? And is there a plan to replenish it if the articles pass?
So this particular article will
You have
take.
to repeat the question.
Do I have to repeat the question?
Oh, no, okay.
Oh, good. Okay. So this particular warrant article, if it passes, we're going to take money out of the HVAC fund first, and this will basically close that fund. The rest of the money is going to come out of the existing building capital reserve fund along with the roof. We'll have about 300,000 left in that. Well, that might be high. We'll have about 200,000 left in that. And again, if we can take some of that federal money, we would leave money in there. There is a plan as part of the CIP to replenish those. one of the issues that we wrestled with this year and do every year is that replenishment is going to be a tax replenishment, whether it comes from taxes raised or fund balance at the end of the year. There's still a tax impact for both of those. So you wrestle with that every year about, what's the impact on taxes to replenish those.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, indulge me for one moment.
They will.
So on Article 3, we're going to do this by a counted vote, just because just want to be careful to make sure the folks in the other rooms know that they've been heard when it comes time to vote. So I'm going to ask my counters to take their positions, and I will first ask all those in favor of Article 3, please vote by raising your hand and your green card. All those opposed, please raise your green card. We have no no's in this room. I'm going to say that the ayes have it. Article 3 is adopted. Are you clapping at the way I handled that? Is that what we're going on? So we're on to Article 4. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $599,600 for the complete replacement of the existing roof, including any costs associated with improved insulation and roof drainage at Bow Elementary School, as presented on the overhead. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to move Article 4, please.
Article 4 has been moved and seconded, and I will recognize Jen again for some discussion.
I promise. I sit down after this. Next slide. Thank you. As we already discussed, the major project at the BES, this is just for the roof replacement. As if we're doing that HVAC system, it just makes sense to do the roof at the same time. If this article is to pass, then it would accomplish the removal of the existing roof down to the roof deck, abatement of all asbestos materials from the current roof, new rooftop insulation, flashing around all rooftop HVAC equipment, removal and replacement of the BES translucent roof panel system in the BES atrium, installation of a new 25-year warranty roof, and again, our scheduled completion date is by August 16th of 2021. Next slide, please.
All set? You're ahead of me. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm gonna count them, how we're gonna do the vote here. Okay, so Article 4 is moving and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion on Article 4, I would ask for those who are in favor, please raise their green card. Okay, and I'm gonna ask you to hold them up. What's the vote in 1105 on this? In room 1109? Thank you. You can lower your cards, please. All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Is a vote in the affirmative, and Article 4 passes. Article 5, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $85,000 for the replacement of the existing skylight in the main foyer at Bow High School, as presented in the overhead. And I will recognize what looks like Bryce. Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I move Article 5 as presented.
I second it.
Thank you. Thank you. And Article 5 has been moved and seconded. I'll recognize Bryce for discussion.
Before I talk about this article, I just want to mention, it's going to be pretty obvious, but it gets progressively less exciting as each one comes along. This is less exciting than the last one and so forth. But you're probably wondering why Jen is the one that's been doing all the talking, and Jen does the work of like all of us combined and then some. She's on the CIP committee, she's on the budget committee, and she's on the BES renovation committee. All those are lots of work, lots of time, lots of commitment. So, and she got the pleasure of getting to speak through most of the meetings. So, but she does a great job. And so this town is very lucky to have her on all these committees because she does a great job. So on to the skylight. So the skylight is out front. If maybe some of you folks noticed that you have to walk a little bit past the bathrooms out there to see it, but it's leaking. It's causing water damage. You can put up the next slide, please. The panels on it have a 20-year lifespan, and it was installed in 1997. So it's past the 20-year span, and there's yellow staining around it, showing it that it is the delamination is happening over time. It's going to be replaced by a local Bow community company that's going to do the work, and it has no tax impact by replacing the skylight.
Thank you, Bryce. Any discussion on Article 5? Seeing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your green card. Please keep them up. What's the vote in room 1105? Room 1109? Thank you. All right, please lower your hands. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, it is a vote in the affirmative. Article 5 passes. We're now on to Article 6. Article 6, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate $62,260 to be added to the area school capital improvements Dunbarton Fees Capital Reserve Fund, established in March 2014, as presented in the overhead. Do I have a motion?
I motion this article.
In a second.
I second.
Okay, Article 6 has been moved and seconded, and I will recognize Martin Osterloh for discussion.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. So this warrant article pertains to the capital improvement fee that Dunbarton pays to the Bow School District as defined in the area agreement that's referenced. The fee for this upcoming year will be $283 per student, and you'll see it's a slight increase from last year as it is coupled to the consumer price index. We've received $281 per student this year. There are a couple of requirements around this, such as the fee must be deposited in a non-lapsing capital reserve fund. It is of note that if this article does not pass, we cannot collect those fees, and thus those fees will be returned to Dunbarton. So we'll lose that money. And the negotiated area agreement provides the definition of certain funds. Actually, next slide. So the Capital Reserve Fund was created in March 2014 at the annual meeting back then. And the first deposit was in the subsequent year in the March of 2015 annual meeting. The balance right now in this fund as of June 30th, 2020 is $174,269. The fees in that fund can only be used at either the middle school or the high school, since the elementary school is not an area school. And there are also certain limitations around what project qualifies for this sort of money. So it has to be capital in nature. It has to be at least 15 years, at least $600,000 of cost, and the Dunbarton share of the cost needs to be proportional to the student population. So to keep it fair. Next slide.
So thank you. Does anyone have any questions about Article 6? Any comments? Seeing none, I will call a vote on Article 6. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. You can put it down. What's the vote on room 1105? Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hands. Thank you. The ayes have it. As a vote in the affirmative, Article 6 passes. We are on to Article 7. Article 7, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $28,000 to be added to the athletic fields and facilities capital reserve fund established in March 2016. As presented in the overhead, do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve Article 7.
Thank you.
I second that.
Okay, Article 7 has been moved and seconded, and I recognize Jenna Reardon for discussion.
So this article is basically asking to continue charging athletic fees for athletes that participate in BES high school sports. It was established in 2016, and we collect $50 per sport, $100 for ice hockey, and then it's $100 cap. So the article is just asking to continue doing that. We deposit the fees into a capital reserve fund that's specifically for athletic field and facility improvements. And right now there's about $75,000 in that balance. I should have said next slide. It's all there. Next slide, yeah. So next slide. That's it.
Okay, anyone have any questions or discussion of Article 7? Okay, seeing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor of Article 7, please raise your card. Thank you. You can lower your card. What is the vote in 1105? And 1109? Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hands. The ayes have it. It is a vote in the affirmative, and Article 7 passes. We are now on to Article 8. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $19,000 for the purchase of athletic protective netting and other athletic facilities upgrades, and to authorize the withdrawal of up to $19,000 from the athletic fields and facilities capital reserve fund established in March 2016. Do I have a motion?
I move Article 8 as presented.
Thank
I
you.
second that.
Article 8 has been moved and seconded. I recognize Eric Schulman for discussion.
Thank you. This is the last warrant article. Warrant Article 8 will withdraw money from the athletic capital reserve fund. You can turn to the next slide. That money will be used for protective netting at the athletic fields at the Bow High School.
at the girls soccer and the boys lacrosse field, the softball and JV soccer field for netting to protect vehicles and spectators at the baseball field and to prevent loss of athletic balls and equipment and other athletic facility upgrades as needed. These funds are already in the capital reserve fund, so it should not affect taxation. That's it.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion of Article 8? Seeing none, I will call a vote. All those in favor of Article 8, please raise your hands. Thank you. $11:05. 11:09. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. It is a vote in the affirmative. Article 8 passes, and I so declare it. Is there any other business that comes before this meeting? Seeing none, I declare it adjourned. Thank you, folks, for your patience. Thank you all. So if you could return your ballots to the supervisors, that'd be great.